So today, I think we both thought it would be a good idea to talk about a universe episode since we're still kind of making our way through universe and we haven't really talked about a specific episode or something specific about universe in a while. And I think you mentioned you just saw the episode Faith, which I believe is episode 13 of season one, 13 maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and actually, that episode, there's a lot of particular different threads of things going on. And so I thought maybe, oh, this is a good one to kind of talk about. And so maybe if you want to share, just to get us going, your initial kind of maybe a short summary of what went on in the episode and then your initial kind of reactions to some of it. And then maybe we'll go into some of the specific points of the show.
Sure. Yeah. What I could first do is just like literally read like the little short like description of it that's on the app that I use to follow the episode because I think it does state some of it well. So it says Destiny stops near an uncharted star orbited by one planet, this time without activating the countdown clock. Lieutenant Scott leads a small team to the planet's surface, where the explorers are amazed to find an abundance of food, water, and sunshine. Um, and so that's kind of basically roughly what happens in that episode. And yeah, I mean, this is the first time that they actually find like a planet that has the things that they need to survive. So it's kind of a big deal, I think, in the sense of having an episode like this. But I definitely um before we kind of get into it, like I do feel like the whole episode gives a very strange vibe because you just feel like something's off and feels too good to be true kind of thing. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if what you want me to go into before we start talking about it, but that's like the rough
That's
overview of basically the episode.
no, that's perfect because I think what you mentioned just now that there's this sort of strange vibe. I mean, I think there's kind of correct me if I'm wrong. There's the two sort of things going on in the episode that kind of pop up throughout, and one is that TJ something is off with her, like Dr.
Hmm.
Johansen, something is wrong with her, and
Yep, she
then
seems unwell. Yeah.
there's some people that because this, I mean, this is a big deal. They just found this planet. There's some people that want to stay there, right? So
Yep.
I think there's some, so that kind of causes also some interesting character conflictions. So maybe what
Yeah.
would you prefer talking about first? Because I think they're two kind of oddly separate issues. But I don't know which one kind of
Yeah.
sticks out more that you're like, yeah, I want to talk about this one first.
Ooh, well, I mean, I think kind of what you mentioned about mentioning kind of almost like the character dynamics in a sense that are currently happening kind of brings an interesting layer to it because if I remember correctly, doesn't isn't this right after the episode of where they had where Rush was trying to take over the ship with the other people and Chloe was involved in that, right? She was
Yes, that's
involved with
right.
trying to help. And so it kind of really made it like military versus the other people on the ship. And then they have to try and coexist and act like everything's just fine when it didn't work out how either side wanted it to work out. And so I think when it reaches this episode, it's kind of like an interesting vibe with the people because it's like you have Chloe and Lieutenant Scott that initially were a thing, right? And they seemed to care for each other. And then they're kind of, in a sense, he's annoyed with her because of not believing that she would have went on the other side trying to take over the ship. And so I think there's still that like annoyance and anger between the two. And then I think it's like clear that throughout what's the nurse's I don't know if she's a nurse, but the doctor's name again, what's her name?
TJ.
TJ. Um with her, it's like they make it clear from the start. Like she just looks like she feels like ill. Like she looks like she wants to puke. She looks like unwell. So that too, I think like what I found interesting about that before it eventually gets to why she's acting that way, um, what did you think was happening? Like, if you can remember when you were watching it before you find out what's going on. Um, did you, because like, I guess what I could say is like, what I was thinking is like, I'm just like, oh, like, I think like maybe there's something that happened like with some sort of like alien thing that no one picked up on. And like, she either like, like maybe there's like an alien inside of her, or like some sort of thing where it's like it's making her act weird and making her act like sick. But like I didn't think it was going to be um that she's pregnant. Like I never, like when they eventually say that she's pregnant, I didn't actually expect that, even though maybe that would have been the logical thing to go to. I kept thinking there was like a bigger thing that was happening with aliens.
I mean, honestly, actually, a Stargate episode, characters mysteriously feeling unwell, at the same time that it's in this episode where they're reaching this planet where they might have, some kind of opportunities. Of course, I went the same place. I went kind of the contagion, some kind of alien contagion, and it's going to cause a problem, that kind of thing. And I mean, I think especially with it going on where there were people on the ship, because I mean, we just mentioned like there's this whole kind of dynamic of there's people still on the ship, and then there's some people on the planet. And then on the planet, if I remember right, some of the people wanted to stay and some didn't. And so
Yeah.
you have all of this, but at the same time, when she was sick, I was thinking, well, what's going to happen is she going to have something that's contagious and then they have to leave them all on the planet? Or like there's some kind of weird quarantine? Like, and then when you have like the fact that there's always this time limit, I think that adds a whole like another layer to this of where that's why my brain kind of went more contagion.
Well, and
So
I think yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're both kind of thinking the same thing. I think also a good point to remember too about this is that they couldn't use the gate.
mhm,
So they were using a ship to fly down. They could only have a certain amount of people. And I believe Colonel Young wanted to decide who went down there, or some people could decide if they wanted to go. But because there was that risk, I believe, right? There was a risk in the beginning of will they arrive there safely? And then they
yes,
also can only stay there for so long to see what's going on the planet. And so there's that risk that if they couldn't get back in time, then they're just kind of stuck there. And because this was before they fully knew until they got there, like what was there, right? They didn't fully know if what their systems were showing that this was a habitable planet, if it actually was. And so
yes,
um then they arrive there, and of course it looks like, this beautiful outdoors, lots of water and trees and things like that. um and then there's still also that weird dynamic because it's still again mixed with people from military and mixed with scientists and different things. um and if I remember correctly, Chloe had decided she wanted to go there. Of course, it always annoys me, like with her, how the show tries to find ways to kind of like just show her off, if that makes sense. Like I feel like it's always very based on her physical appearance, and it kind of annoys me. Because it's like they have like the scene where like she's in the water and she's like bathing in the water, and so then of course they show that scene where it's like you just like, like you see like her shoulder, and you know that she's like in the water bathing naked, but like obviously you don't see it. And then of course Lieutenant Scott happens to be the one to pass by when she's in the water. So it's just kind of like things like that, like scenes like that annoy me because it just feels so set up. Like,
yeah. I mean,
not that it's a big
especially
deal, but
I mean, I totally actually forgot about that, but now I remember because yeah, they were fighting like in the context of this episode, you're completely right that there was this whole like sort of conflict because they had the civilian attempt of takeover, and then Chloe is a civilian, she's not military, and so her like then partner is military. So at this episode, they're kind of like arguing, I guess. They're not really on the same level anymore. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, didn't they also have similar things with like Eli when he would go shower with her or something, or like help her shower or something in the yeah. It just it feels a little bit
Yeah.
like on I think it's more of a shock because in all the like previous Stargates, there was never, other than in like the first Children of the Gods episode, and then they removed it, there was never any like
Yeah.
sort of gratuitous partial like nudity or anything like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I just feel like in any show, whenever they have scenes like that, it just always just like feels like it's just for people to oogle over. It's just kind of like scenes like that sometimes just like irritate me because it's like completely pointless. Within like especially like with like episodes like this where it's kind of like it doesn't bring anything extra to it. It's just kind of like I just feel like with her character in particular, I mean, all of the women on the show are all very beautiful, you know, but you don't get that vibe of like they're showing off their bodies all the time and like trying to have that be a constant thing. Like they very really sexualize her, I think. But but yeah, like when they get on the planet, also I feel like that's when we're also introduced or at least reminded of other side characters, and I don't know their names because some of them weren't really in the scenes too much, but there was one guy that I don't know his name that they kept showing, and I believe they've shown him maybe once before in a different episode. That I kind of get the vibe like maybe something's gonna happen with his character maybe in the next episode or something, because I
mhm,
believe he's one of the ones that ends up staying on the planet, I think.
mhm.
I don't know if
Okay.
you know who I'm talking about because I don't know his name, but he's like one of the guys that's down there and basically kind of gets irritated. Oh, I think he was talking about like feeling like there was a higher reason for them to be on the planet. He kept spouting like religion, thinking that like God
Hey,
meant for them to be there. And he was almost getting a little too excited with that concept, like almost a little extreme in the sense that like he was really making people sway one way or the other. So like the people that went down to that planet, um initially, like, yes, they were kind of divided because of what had happened in the previous episodes, but they otherwise were all trying to get along to see like what this planet is like and things like that. And then when a lot of them started to like love being on that planet because they didn't want to be stuck in a ship and they wanted to stay, one of that guy's big reasonings was saying that, well, God meant for us to be here or something like that, like this, because I think the
right.
planet just appeared, right? Like it wasn't like initially it was even there and then it
Yes.
appeared out of
Yeah.
nowhere. Um, so
I mean,
like, yeah.
it's such a it's really like the more you talk about it, because I think with the universe it's so hard when you're watching it. Everything is so, I think, dictated towards the suspense and kind of like figuring out what's going to happen, that sometimes I think
Yeah.
these little things are caught. And I have to almost go back and say, now that you bring these kind of things up, I wonder if it's actually a little bit more rewatchable than I thought in the beginning. Because now when you mentioned this
Ah,
kind of thing, I start thinking, well, yeah, actually, this is a really good sort of display of how like sociological and psychological implications of this kind of survival can play out. Because when you
yeah.
really think about it, I mean, when you're watching it, you're in this situation where you go, oh my gosh, they found this place that might be their salvation. It kind of came out of nowhere. And now they're kind of just arguing about whether to stay there because, maybe this is like, an out of being in the ship. But when you think about it from like more of a survival perspective, they're trapped in a place where they don't know how long they're going to be trapped there. And this is a place that could be like a an escape. And
Hmm.
even if somebody is sort of giving information that could seem like wrong or fantasy or something like this, it could definitely spur people into a different direction simply because of the trauma of being put on the ship. And
Yeah, that's a
so
really good point. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting to look at it in terms of those perspectives, because it's like similar to how when people, like individuals, if you have a lot of trauma, like personal trauma, it's very easy to go into situations of escape or believe things that like maybe are more fantasy situations, or that things could be your savior that aren't, whether it's people or situations or whatever. And so I think it's interesting that to have like the way that this plays out on sort of a more, like on a way broader but also way scaled down level, it's really interesting.
Yeah, because I think too, like, you know, when they realize that there's like actual, like, I believe like they find like actual fruit that tastes like
Hmm.
fruit, if I remember correctly, and they have the water and they realize they're able to potentially like grow things on the planet and survive there. They're not like some of them weren't even like giving much thought to the fact that they don't know what the weather's like. The weather could easily change. They may, like, I think it's brought up later on where one of them were arguing the fact that, well, the winters could get incredibly cold. Like that alone could kill you if you don't have the proper shelter. And like, what if the
Yes.
food doesn't last as long as you think it's going to last? And so like there's all these things that would also be like massive survival mode stuff that they would need to do on that planet. But it's almost like many of them wanted to escape and just kind of be in the now of what they were currently seeing because they're stuck in
Yeah.
that dark ship with all of the chaos, that ensues there. And then like it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like being released out of like a little dark like closet, it's like suddenly you see light, and so like it's interesting. And then I think then what also brings another interesting layer to it is then later on you find out that TJ is pregnant,
Yes.
and that brings a whole other thing, um where it's like then she's thinking of the survival of her baby, and for some reason seems to think that she'll survive better on a random planet than being in a ship. I don't really know why she
Yes.
thinks that, because like yes, maybe they can have like sunlight and water and food, but at the same time, I don't know, to me that seems like a more dangerous um thing to do, because I don't even think anyone else on that planet that was with them was like a doctor. So like when
Hmm.
she were to give birth, who would help her do that? Like I think she was the doctor. So it just didn't make sense, but like she wasn't thinking clearly in my opinion. Um but then she ends up getting talked back onto the ship anyways, because then Colonel Young flies down there and basically tells some of them to stay and threatens the other one. I forget what happened actually, how he got them to go back up to the Destiny. Like it was something that like he wasn't giving them a decision, but even though
Yeah.
people fought back, and then he kind of like I think Chloe got scared and decided to go. And then I think Lieutenant Scott was only going to stay there because Chloe was there and TJ, and he felt like he was obligated to take care of them. And
Yes. Yep.
so, um, but then they all decided at the end of that episode, you see all of them going back on the ship. So
Mhm.
I haven't seen the episode after that. So I'm sure there's a lot that goes down after that, that maybe makes things more of a make sense and things like that. But like what were you thinking when some of them didn't want to go back? Did you think there was a possibility that they would actually just stay there, or did you just assume that something's going to happen to have it be that, especially because some of them were like the main cast, like, did you think that like that TJ was just going to stay there, for example, and not go back to the ship, or were, I don't know.
That's a very good question, because I mean, some did stay back, right? But they weren't any of the main
Mhm.
characters. So they were there.
Right.
And, but I mean, there's always something that could happen where maybe I thought there's two scenarios. I mean, the main ones, of course, would either go back or they would get stuck there, but then something would allow that they can kind of get them somehow, but maybe we'd have a few episodes with them being stuck there. So yeah, I mean, this I think it is very it was a really interesting dynamic. Um, what did you think out of curiosity? Like what I mean, because now there's also the aspect that was thrown in that kind of inspired TJ to want to stay as her pregnancy. Um, I mean, for probably many reasons, because she wanted her kid to have, you know, fresh air and everything, but also I'm sure there's maybe some circumstantial situations considering whose baby it is and everything like that. What did you think when you found out that she was pregnant? Were you surprised? Like, I mean, obviously you were surprised, but what were your thoughts?
I was mainly surprised because I was so sure that it was like some like you says alien contagion or something. Um and so that's why I was surprised, but at the same time I'm just like, well, they've made it clear from day one that she had something going on with Colonel Young, and um like I don't know. I kind of feel like the pregnancy thing came out of nowhere, in all honesty, that I kind of wonder why, like if there's like I don't know if that was just a thought that came up and they thought, oh, well, what happens if she was pregnant with Colonel Young's baby? Like, so it's like, I don't know. It's like a surprise, but yet not a surprise. It's kind of like, I would be surprised if it was someone else's baby, like if we thought it was Colonel Young's, but it was like Eli's.
That would be
That'd
really
be awkward.
funny.
That'd
Yeah.
be awkward. But I mean, so it's kind of like I'm curious how that's gonna roll out in the following episodes since I haven't seen them yet. I mean, obviously it brings in a lot because I think like Lieutenant Scott had mentioned to her like that he kind of had a vibe that he knew that there was something between the two of them,
True. Yes, that's
which
true.
that was the first episode that anyone has said anything to her about that.
Hmm.
So I felt like it was kind of like out of nowhere, that all of a sudden, you have other characters mentioning like, oh yeah, we knew you guys were a thing, because there was no indication of that prior. Like there
Yeah.
was an indication of them together, like obviously there was something there. But besides that, and like every now and then they'd have Colonel Young, there was an episode, I think, before this one where he saw TJ talking to a different guy
Yep.
on deck or something. I don't know what you would call it on the ship, where they're sitting there drinking, talking. Um, and so like, and he seemed like a little jealous, like he was almost like going over towards her to have comfort and then decided to walk away when he saw her talking. Those are the only little things. So to then suddenly have it that be that she's pregnant, I'm like wondering how far along she is, because I don't think they've been together since they've been on the ship, right? So that's a little weird to me if she's just now, because I don't know how long they've been on the ship at this point. It's
That's
kind
a
of
very good
unclear.
question. Couple months, maybe?
Um,
I don't know. But yeah.
so it's like, I'm trying to think like when I was pregnant, I mean, granted it was planned, so like I was maybe always looking for signs and symptoms of pregnancy, but I knew fairly like early on, like, and I knew. So it's kind of like I'm just thinking, just in terms of, I know everyone's body reacts differently to pregnancies, and some people might have symptoms more extreme and whatnot. Um, but I kind of like wondered the time frame, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like they've, and also I kind of wonder like the stress of all of that happening. How could she have possibly not had a miscarriage like during this time? Because that would be incredibly stressful, everything they've been going through. So that makes me question it too. So that's all weird to me. But also, one thing that we didn't mention that doesn't have to do with the pregnancy, that is a big thing in this episode, is the huge things they see, the alien structures that they see on the
Right.
planet. And so initially they didn't see that in any kind of scan, right?
True,
So
true, true.
like, um, and basically it it leaves them questioning like why those are there. I can't remember if light gets shot into the sky. Something happens where those devices activate,
Hmm.
and I think they don't know what's happening. And I know you've seen after this, so you know what happens, but like if you can remember what you maybe thought before you knew what happened, whatever it is that happens with all of that, like,
Yeah, I mean,
you
okay.
know,
So
yeah.
to backtrack a little bit to the pregnancy. I mean, I don't know if you had looked it up because I was curious and I looked it up. I mean, the real reason is because the actress was pregnant.
I was gonna
And
ask if that actually happened. Yeah. I didn't
yes, so
look it up
that
though.
so that I think is the reason behind the pregnancy. But like they did this with for example with Claudia Black that during Stargate SG-1, actually, it was integrated into the plot line that she was pregnant with the Orosai, and so it was kind of integrated in an interesting way. Maybe
Oh,
this
I
is
didn't
actually,
know Claudia Black was actually pregnant.
yes, that's exactly how the Orosai came to be.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yep, there you go. So now, so there's that, and in this, it's actually kind of interesting that it's so unconsequential or inconsequential. Like it's basically, nope, she's just pregnant from, an affair. But at the same time, it's really consequential because the character dynamics are so like at the foreground, I think, of the show. And
Yeah.
so like it's kind of an interesting question of, well, how will that affect their relationship? Then how will that affect other dynamics with people on the ship? Will people kind of, because I mean you imagine that in this sort of circumstance, there's people that will maybe disapprove because it's kind of like an
Yeah.
affair. Um,
Yeah.
but there's also people that maybe are I guess in a way it might bring them closer. This is like the one situation where I really like started to like Chloe because I felt like her friendship with TJ was kind of like better after this announcement. And I kind of like, I don't know, I like when they are together. Like it kind of made me think, oh, I really like I like Chloe with TJ. It kind of
Hmm.
offsets the Chloe with Eli
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
don't like as much. And I thought her like kind of concern for TJ was really sweet and it kind of made the character more endearing, which I really liked. Um, but it is kind of an interesting circumstance that's actually very uninteresting. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and it's also funny, it's very foreshadowed in the 200th episode of SG-1 where they say, oh, let's just replace this with a younger and hipper cast. And then the one says, I'm pregnant, and it's like all these like in dynamics and everything. So, but actually in this situation, it's actually so complicated because they're in this
Yeah.
weird, stuck in this whole circumstance, like of, being trapped on a ship. Yeah, the alien structures, it's really tough. I don't remember what I initially thought, and I can't really, I won't talk anymore about it. Um,
Okay,
because
because you're afraid you're gonna say something.
because actually sometimes some of this stuff blurs a bit together about some of these, and then um probably after the first or second episode of season 2, then we can kind of maybe take a return
Yeah.
to talk about the planet and
Okay.
everything. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
mean, clearly. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say like out of curiosity, like you're in episode 13, so you're kind of past the halfway point, but making your way towards the end. Um, are you starting to feel any kind of feelings of what might be the main enemy at the end, or not really?
Ooh, that's a good question. No. I
Okay,
mean,
interesting.
I feel like I mean, the main thing is always kind of like them trying to get back home.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's always going to obviously be like the main thing in the sense that that's like their objective. Um, I mean, there were like the alien like abduction things that happened
Hmm.
where that's how you get rushed back and everything. So I don't know if they're the same aliens that are linked to the planet. Obviously something with this planet in my opinion, at least for the first season, is probably going to be a massive deal. And it's probably all tied in together. And maybe that will bring forth like some sort of like alien villain kind of thing. Um, I have seen Universe before, but I can't remember it because it was so long ago. But I do remember there being something with that happens like in the following episode that I haven't seen yet.
Mm.
And so yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that maybe it has to do, like, I don't know, like I'm kind of curious since they only had 2 seasons.
Mhm.
Um, I wonder how much comes through that, you know, because they probably would have had more to the storyline. Like I can't even like, and I know like uh it's probably left because I don't know if they knew they were going to be canceled by the second season. So it's probably left on like a cliffhanger that's really annoying. Um
I've heard a lot of people say that it's left on a cliffhanger that's really annoying.
yeah.
So probably
Yeah.
they didn't know they
So
were going to be canceled.
yeah. So it's like I kind of feel like I guess a long dragged out way of answering your question is that the alien devices that were introduced to in this episode plays a large role in some sort of threat for them. Whether that would be something intended to be into the end of the show, I don't know. But I
Mhm.
definitely feel like it's something that probably continues to be a massive thing for season 1 at least. And something massive must happen with that at the end of season 1 going into season 2. That's my guess.
Mhm.
But I mean, I think Stargate Universe is unique in the sense that it's different that they're trying to get home. So, and I know
Mhm.
we've kind of talked about that before, but like they're trying to get home, stuck on a ship. So that's always going to be kind of like the main underlying goal, that everything else is just kind of added to that story. So it's kind of different in the sense of how other Stargate episodes are, where it's like there's that main villain that, they're trying to get rid of, like the Goa'ulds or Wraith or replicators, and so I don't feel like it's going to follow um that kind of vibe where it's like that's the main focus necessarily. I feel like it's going to be kind of blended. So they'll meet things that cause a danger and it gets blended with that ultimate goal of trying to make it home, basically. That's my guess.
It's kind of funny that like when you think about it, SG-1, their like main focus was going elsewhere outside of Earth,
Yeah.
basically. And in this one,
Yeah.
they're trying to get back to Earth. So it's like full
Yeah.
circle. We
Yeah.
explored and now we just it's really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think um I mean then the other question is how an episode like this kind of impacts the character dynamics that were built up in the previous episodes. Because in the
Mhm.
previous episodes, we've had this sort of infighting built in between military and civilian. And of course, in this episode, I think they probably did this quite on purpose that the people that were put on the planet, some were civilians and some were military. The people that stayed on the ship was a balance. So there were some civilians and some military. Um, and so, like, we also get this sense of this sort of scenario then rebuilding some relationships and diffusing some tension, but also kind of increasing some tensions, I think. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what did you think about that aspect?
Like the aspect of how of the dynamics and how it shifts and changes like between characters.
Like, do you feel after this episode, do you feel that some of that kind of infighting has been repaired a little bit because of them being thrown in these sort of complex situations? Or do you feel like maybe on an individual level, like say, Chloe and uh Scott, but maybe not on
Yeah.
a greater level?
It's weird because I feel like it's unclear because I feel like they insinuate as if people are starting to work together. People kind of communicate in a way like they're almost kind of tiptoeing around pissing each other off, basically, at least in the beginning of this episode when like they're talking about the other planet. But then you get that underlying vibe of like really like they're not okay with each other, is
Hmm.
the vibe I get. And then it like especially you can tell between Chloe and Lieutenant Scott. Um, by the end of the episode, I feel like there's that part of Lieutenant Scott that cares for Chloe and it's changed up a bit, where it seems like he's willing to give her a chance to kind of eventually be okay with each other. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I feel like it definitely does not feel repaired by any means. And I feel like it's kind of one of those things that they're all kind of tolerating each other and trying to be okay. But there's that still underlying level of ick that they all feel towards each other that they
The
try
underlying
and,
ick.
yeah, the underlying ick. Um, that all of us in this world experience when there's shady people we have to deal with and you
Yes.
have to still be involved with them. It's an underlying level of ick. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's basically what I feel is that I don't feel like it's okay yet. I mean eventually I assume it will be, but at
Hmm.
this point I don't think it is.
Yeah. No, I agree with you that by the end of this episode, there's still this kind of tension, even though they're trying to repair things. It's also really hard for me to imagine a scenario in which Chloe and Scott really go back to the way they are or the way they were, just because
Yeah.
like it's kind of, I mean, it seems like to me, I don't know, like Scott, he has so much of identity as, you know, being his profession, what he does. And I would imagine that that's probably a little bit difficult, like to
Yeah.
negotiate that. So I don't know. And with
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, one that is I find interesting to me, and I'm curious, how do you feel about TJ and Young, especially knowing the circumstance around her pregnancy? Are you rooting for them now, or do you not?
No, I just don't like them together at all. It just gives me the ick. I've never been a big fan of Young. I really like TJ. Her I really
Yeah,
like. I just feel like she could do better in that regard. He's so like broody, you know? Like he's just always so like I don't know. I just don't like him. I'm sure many people would disagree with me on that. Like he seems like a character that many people maybe like. I don't know. But like he's just always annoyed me and like as the episodes have continued, I've been less annoyed by him. But in terms of his relationship with TJ, I just feel is really, really, really toxic. And I just kind of feel bad that if she actually ends up having a baby, which I'm guessing she won't. I'm guessing they're gonna have something happen where the baby dies in the show. Um, but if she actually were to have it, that they both raised it on the ship, um, I guess I'd like hope that they would be like cool for the kid, but like otherwise their relationship just like weirds me out that I just feel like I could imagine them kind of like tolerating co-parenting but not actually ever being together. Like they almost seem like the type that was more of like an excitement for them to have an affair than
yeah,
actually caring about each other. And so it's like something that happened because of that kind of behavior as opposed to them actually genuinely truly caring for each other and being together. I just don't see it personally. But I mean, how do you feel about that?
yeah. Like you'd almost feel happier for her if it really was Eli's baby, and her and Eli were like secretly together and nobody knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that would be more like a Taylor situation, I guess, where she got pregnant and they wrote it into the show, and it ended up being a character we didn't really expect or know about. So that would be
Yeah.
kind of like that. In that case, I wouldn't like, but I don't know. I have a really hard time like picturing them together at all. Like, so I think that's where
Yeah.
maybe that comes in that it must have just been because of the affair, because it's usually like characters have some kind of specific chemistry, and I just don't feel like the kind of chemistry between the two of them in that way. Um,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah. I feel
that's
like he feels more like her father.
yeah, maybe.
He
Yeah,
feels like he doesn't feel like an equal to her. Like, and
yeah.
maybe it's because of his job position. I don't know. But just his vibe, like, regardless of if they're a similar age or not, I have no clue. I can't tell. But like, he gives off like a more of like, if in a different like show they played father and daughter, that wouldn't be surprising to me. Like, and I
Yeah.
know he's probably not the right age to actually be her father, but like that's kind of like she gives off a little bit more of like a youthful vibe that I could just imagine her being with someone just very different, you know? Uh even like the guy that was on the planet that was like spouting religion, like I could see her being with him instead of like young. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's the authority balance because he's in such a
Yeah.
higher position. So, I mean, it's kind of like in a weird way, it's like O'Neill and Carter, but if O'Neill was in this term, in this sense of like authority figures, if O'Neill was actually Hammond, so it'd be more like Hammond and Carter. And then you'd feel like there was a really big like difference in authority.
Woof. That just wow. Just
You couldn't
I'm
picture that
just
one.
I'm just such a visual person. So immediately my mind just like, ew, no, no,
You
no.
went all the way with that visual.
Not fully all the way, but like
Oh,
but like it just like is oh man. Oh ugh. Just makes me sick to my stomach thinking of that one. But anyways.
yeah. Well, yeah, like so I think that's probably the similarity in power dynamic because in
Yeah.
terms of how much power he has over her, especially because I'm pretty sure she's like some kind of I mean, she's a medic, but if I remember right, she's still kind of in training, like in some way. Like they made it sound like in some way her education is still in development. And he's a
Yeah.
colonel already. And like, if I remember right, Colonel O'Neill, he started as a colonel, but I mean, Carter was like basically career established I mean, not like,
Yeah.
but she was like, it wasn't like she was still in cadet training or something at the time that, she met O'Neill, which is so that would be kind of a
Yeah.
similar, it'd be kind of like if O'Neill
It
and that cadet that Carter kind of took on like as to mentor for that episode, like had a thing. It would be very weird. It's like teacher and student kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I feel like because like if you think of like O'Neill and Carter, there's so much respect between the two of them. And
Yeah.
like there's a kindness with O'Neill that is not there at all, in my opinion, with Young. Like I feel like he actually seems like the kind of character that if O'Neill and Young had to always work together, they would hate each other.
Yes, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you brought up that he was broody, and the first thing I thought is like it's almost like the anti-O'Neill because like
Yeah,
and actually all the both Shepard and Mitchell also had the same kind of attitude of like this can do, like almost
yeah,
this super optimistic, positive, like we can do anything with a little bit of sarcasm, humor, and you're right that like Young is a little bit more broody and dark in that sense.
yeah,
And so it's
yeah.
almost like they intentionally picked someone that was like opposite of those characters.
Yeah,
So
because he seems like the kind that would be so mad with O'Neill's humor. Like it would
yes,
just really piss him
yes.
off. Like he wouldn't laugh, he would just be mad. And so it's like, yeah, it's funny how it's like if you start comparing some of the characters with how you think they would be with like other characters from other shows, like it's just kind of funny.
Yeah, oh totally, totally. Like who would get along the best? Who would get along the least? I think Eli would probably get along with a lot of them. I think
Yeah,
like
yeah,
O'Neill would probably be in the like he would humor him and whip him into shape, kind of like because he's younger and he's not military, I mean, he's not quite disciplined, so I'm sure he would be on the tail end of some jokes, but they'd probably get along, like
yeah. Do you feel like if you think of like SG1 characters, um Do you feel like TJ, if like she was like a character on SG-1, do you think she would be one that'd be like a love interest of Daniel Jackson?
I could see that, especially if you take into account the fact that, she had this affair and everything. Like, if she was on SG-1 right now, I would totally imagine Daniel like suddenly becoming interested in her and then like being the one that's like, oh, we can raise the baby together, blah, blah, blah. Like, I mean, honestly, like this would be because,
Yeah.
he likes when things are damaged, then he is going for like, like there's
That's
some kind
so
of,
true. Yeah.
yeah. So I could totally see it. I could totally see it.
Oh my gosh, too funny. Oy. But yeah, I mean, I think like with this episode, I really think it's kind of like a turning point in the show, in a sense of probably what's to come.
Hmm.
Because I think this is probably one of the first times it really does start to show some kind of, I mean, a few episodes back was like more of the alien threat, right? So it's kind of like they're kind of tiptoeing into that part of the show where it's probably going to have more of that, I assume. um and so yeah, I mean, I'm curious like to hear like other people's thoughts on this episode, if they can just keep in mind that like I haven't seen the next stuff yet. So try not give
So no
spoilers.
spoilers.
But like I'm curious like people's thoughts on all this stuff we basically just talked about, like because there was a lot that happened in this episode with the pregnancy and the dynamics and the planet and the aliens and like
Yeah.
all of that. So it'd be really interesting to kind of hear what, if people can remember their initial like reactions to the show, maybe when they first saw it, if they've watched it a million times, if they can remember that. It would be really interesting to hear about, because I think it's kind of a different episode in a sense for universe at this point of the show. So yeah.
Yeah. And how excited were you when you first heard them say that there might be a planet that has like life forms on it and or life ability for life on it? Like that might be, did you think that they would stay? I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting. I think to me what's very interesting that you said, oh, like we can talk about this one because when I was kind of rereading it, it did not occur to me ever when I was watching the episode. But then as I started going, I was like, oh, actually, maybe I almost want to rewatch some of this because when you look at it and in
Yeah.
retrospect, you're not focused on what happens next. You realize that there's so many more intricacies of it. So maybe it's
Yeah.
also kind of like a thing that made me think, okay, maybe this show is more rewatchable than I thought.
Yeah, because even just talking about it, I too started realizing, oh, there's actually a lot more in this episode than I realized, like
Yes.
as we started talking about it, then like things would come back to my memory. So I feel like Universe probably is like that, where you initially, it's so much condensed into one, and it
Yes.
kind of like is almost blurred together. So it's like, yeah, it's in that sense, maybe it is very rewatchable. Like, I mean, I still think half of season one is still kind of boring or hard, not boring, that's a wrong word, but hard to initially really get into because it's so intense. At least that's how I
Yes.
felt. But then after the whole rush thing happens, then it's like I could watch multiple episodes. Like, so yeah. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's super
but yeah.
interesting. And I guess, yeah, like another question would be kind of how you feel like, were you also like us? Did you think that were you surprised to find out that TJ was pregnant? And how do you feel about that? Or how did you feel about that? Because that's also an interesting, a lot of these interpersonal things, people complain about it in the show, but I think it also is kind of interesting considering the circumstances of
Yeah.
what they're
Yeah.
going through.
It And it'd be cool for people to put that in the comments, both on YouTube or Spotify, because Spotify does have a thing now where you can put things in the comments if you're listening on Spotify.